I was looking up the term shovel prune, trying to find out its origin. If you're a gardener, you may be familiar with the term shovel prune. It basically means to remove a plant in a polite way. And the first time I heard it, it was from a Rosarian. In fact, the only people I know who use the term shovel prune are Rosarians. And so I figured, well, it must have some sort of rose background, but unfortunately I hit too many dead ends. But I will just assume that shovel pruning is a Rosarian term because you need to make room for all the new roses that are coming out. It's a great habit to get into. Rosarians love new roses. They love to try new roses. They love to smell them as well. And one Rosarian has a nice bully pulpit here in the Sacramento area. Debbie Arrington is a master Rosarian with the Sacramento Rose Society. She knows her roses. And she and Kathy Morrison put out every day of the year the Sacramento Digs Gardening newsletter to your email inbox. There's a lot of good information in that. Even if you don't live in Sacramento, you could open a free subscription to the Sacramento Digs Gardening newsletter and get all sorts of good gardening information. For instance, in a recent newsletter, she talked about the new roses for 2026, which of course is for like a car enthusiast. They love to see when the new cars come out in the fall. Well, Rosarians are like that in January because January is the time for shovel pruning, but you got to plant something else. So we're going to find out what's new for 2026 that is got the Rosarians aflutter, if you will, because why not? Let's sell some roses here. Debbie Arrington, have you bought any of these roses that we're going to talk about?
Not yet, okay. but they are on my list. I have to figure out how much room I have to get some roses in. And you're right about shovel pruning. It is a pruning of last resort. When you've done everything you can to that rose and it still isn't performing, it either has to move or has to go. And that's, that's how you do it, is you dig it out. Some Rosarians say, the way to make sure a rose has a better season is to just show it the shovel, and somehow they'll wake up and have a lot more growth that year. What happens is that over the years, a rose bush can lose its vitality and just start not performing as well as it should. And, by losing its vitality, it atrophies. It gets less juice out to the end of its canes. It stops putting out new canes. And if it doesn't put out new canes, then it will stop putting out roses. And a rose bush that doesn't bloom is just a pile of thorns. So, it's time to move on to something else. And fortunately, there are still rose hybridizers and rose breeders and rose nurseries and people that are willing to grow new roses and introduce them. And the roses that we are getting now, our brand new roses of 2026, were actually go back to 2016 or earlier when these roses were originally bred, because it takes about 10 years for a rose to come to market after they first discover that seedling. So these roses have been in the works for a long time, but they all represent trends that have been going for most of this new century.
Yeah, what are the common threads on the popular new roses? What are rose growers looking for?
Well, it's like they say, everything old is new again. People want roses that smell like roses. They want roses that look like roses. And they want roses that have all of those good traits, but in a very easy care format that doesn't need spraying. In fact, doesn't need much care at all. And roses are naturally tend to be on the low water side. They, you can get by with irrigation twice a month easily here in Sacramento, which is saying something for, a water-wise plant. That's the standard. If you can do that, then it's drought tolerant. And these roses, the ones that are being introduced now, have very good foliage. It's very clean, fungal resistant, disease resistant, and looking very pretty to set up that frame those beautiful new blooms.
You pointed out in the newsletter that some now are even self-cleaning blooms, that no deadheading is needed. I find that hard to believe. But
it works. And it's particularly true of what they call the landscape roses and your low-growing ground cover or shrub roses. These plants just put out masses of blooms, hundreds of blooms at once. And to go through and deadhead that would be quite a chore to keep those going. So instead, what happens is the flowers die back to the little stem that holds it on to the end of the cane, or where it comes out of the cane. And that just dries out, and then it just falls off. So, and it never forms any rose hips, because the way these flowers die back, and because they die back that way, it just drops off, and then a new bloom comes out of the next leaf, one down from where that comes out. And so what ends up happening is these plants stay very short, under 1 foot tall, and they just keep putting on more and more blooms. So they're just constantly covered with flowers. And they call them carpet roses because they form like a carpet of blooms along the ground.
So these landscape roses, these carpet roses, this sounds like a rose that would do well in just about any part of the United States.
Yes, it would. That's part of their charm and their sellability, is that they not only are very clean and easy care, but they're also cold tolerant and heat tolerant. So they can do both extremes. A lot of these roses are hardy down to under 20 degrees, even colder. And then they also can tolerate temperatures in the 90 or over 100. So you've got this wide range of growing conditions and looking beautiful all through spring, summer, into fall.
So landscape roses are basically the Toyota or the Honda of the rose world. But when new rose introductions come out, it's like cars. They're sports cars. They're big SUVs. They are roses that stand out. It's the Hummers of the rose world, if you will, that we're going to be talking about. I don't see any landscape roses on this list.
No, because, well, most of the landscape roses are sold by color, and they're series of roses. Like, one of the popular ones from Star Roses is the Drift series, and they form drifts of roses, and they're low growing carpet roses, and they're sold by color. So there's apricot drift, peach drift, yellow drift, white drift, etc. But each one has a little bit of its own personality. Like the apricot drift, which I have peach drift and apricot drift both. The peach drift has much more ruffled flower to it. It's semi-double, with about 12 petals, and the flower it's small, about 2 inches across, but the plant is covered with just dozens and dozens of these blooms. So it just looks like this whole mound, of roughly peach blooms. While the apricot one has a little bit more substance to the flower.
Well, you said the magic word, ruffled, and that is one of the roses that are new rose introductions for 2026, Ruffled Romance. And this is a floribunda, and I guess we better define our terms here.
Yeah, because there's lots of rose terminology that, tends to confuse people, but we'll break it down the easy way. Most people, when you think of roses, you think of the roses like you get from the florist, and those are hybrid teas. And a hybrid tea rose, it has generally they have a formal look to them with a high point in the middle, and they look the way people imagine a dozen red roses to look. That's that sort of formal look. Floribunda, on the other hand, those are like a bouquet on a stem. Instead of one stem, one flower, you have bunches of flowers together on that one stem. And the name Floribunda comes from the Latin for abundance of flowers. So that's where Floribunda comes from. Floribundas also tend to be shorter plants, most of them. And hybrid teas typically will grow bushes that are 4.5 to 5 feet tall, while most floribundas stay under 3 feet. There are several exceptions to that, but they tend to be lower growing. And because they have a growth structure where the stems are shorter and the leaves are closer together, the distance between nodes where the leaves come out or the blooms come out is much shorter. You can prune floribundas with a hedge clipper. They can, because anywhere you cut them, it will be okay because there's not much dieback on the stems, and they will produce lots and lots and lots of flowers. And floribundas also can grow in less space than a full-grown hybrid tea. So because of their shorter structure and less space requirements, they have become very popular with people with smaller gardens. And so floribundas are one of the areas where we're seeing many more rose introductions, where in past years, most of the new rose introductions that got people excited would be hybrid teas. Now, about half of them are floribundas.
Well, I bet a lot of people are wondering now, well, since it's such a compact plant, I bet it could grow in a container. Would that be true?
Yes. They're wonderful container roses, too.
And what size container is best for a floribunda?
You want to have at least 2 square feet of space for the roots. It's mostly you need space for the roots, more than anything. So, I'd say at least a 12-inch pot is about as small as you could go with one of those. And I have some in 12-inch, containers and 5-gallon pots. You can, they grow well in. But if you put it in like a 10 or even, a half wine barrel or something like that, they'll be very happy forever.
I would want happy roses, so I'd put them all in barrels.
Yes.
All right. But Ruffled Romance then is from Jackson and Perkins.
Yes.
And it's a yellow blend.
It's a yellow blend. And it's a Ruffled Romance. It sounds like its name. It's a very pretty, roughly yellow rose. It's a golden yellow with little peach and pink accents on the edges of the bloom. It's very cuppy looking. Instead of having a very pointed bloom, it has a very round, soft look to it. It's extremely disease resistant and has a nice fragrance. The claim to fame on this is it's the last rose that was created by the legendary hybridizer, Dr. Keith Zeri. And he did hundreds and hundreds of roses, and this is the last one of his to come to market. And it's being marketed by Jackson and Perkins, so that means it has a very wide footprint across the U.S., since they're one of the major distributors as well as hybridizers.
Good size flowers.
It's good size flowers, too. They're about 4 inches across, which is a good size for a floribunda. And when you consider that you're having 6 to 8 blooms all together on one stem, it does look like a bouquet on a stem.
I noticed that a lot of the roses we'll be talking about claim strong disease resistance. And out here, that's sort of a secondary concern because of our low humidity. But back east in the Midwest, you want good disease resistance.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. We're spoiled in Sacramento in that we have ideal growing conditions for roses. As you said, that low humidity in the summer, that really helps. And also, when we hit 90 degrees, that kills most of the fungal diseases. So we don't have the black spot and powdery mildew and rust that other parts of the country have. But places like Louisiana and Alabama and Mississippi, or any place in the Midwest or on the Eastern Seaboard that has those high summer humidity, it's almost impossible to grow nice roses without a lot of spraying because the plant just becomes overwhelmed with these fungal diseases. So the hybridizers have really been focusing on strong disease resistance, so you don't need to spray, because that's one of the things that gardeners want to cut out of their gardening is any spraying, because besides killing the fungal disease, you kill a lot of beneficial insects and other things too. So having that disease resistance is very important.
All right. So a lot of these will have disease resistance. And by the way, we'll have pictures of all of these in the newsletter portion of the Beyond the Garden Basics. So if you're wondering what they're looking like, take a look at the newsletter too while you're listening to the podcast. A dark red hybrid tea rose from Jackson & Perkins is on the list for exciting new roses for 2026 called Sealed with a Kiss.
And this is the best true dark red rose out of the class of 26. It is near black. It has that velvety look to it. And it looks like a classic, hybrid tea exhibition rose. And it's the type of rose that people that are rose exhibitors like myself gravitate towards because it has what they call presence, particularly on the exhibition table. It's one of those roses that across the room you see it and you go, wow. And that's the kind of rose this is. For people that have other roses in their garden, it has the color it's a little darker than a Mr. Lincoln, but it has a much more formal form to it, sort of like, Veterans Honor or Olympiad. Those both have very pointy form to them, but it has very, very dark red velvety blooms. And it's one of those, it has very long stems too. So it puts out nice 3-foot stems. So it makes a nice cut rose.
Is there such a thing as a black rose?
Not yet.
All right. So for those of you planning a goth party, you may want to just settle for Sealed with a Kiss.
Yes. Because, there's roses that look very, very, very dark red, but they're not true black. They haven't reached that yet. They haven't come out with a true black, and they haven't come out with a true blue either.
All right. Another floribunda that's on the list of good roses for 2026. It's a semi-double floribunda, and Debbie will explain semi-double to us. Flash Gordon.
Yes. Flash Gordon. And Flash Gordon, it has these big, bright pink blooms, and semi-double means it has about 12 to 16 petals. And how they came up with that is a single rose has 6 to 8 petals. And so it looks, it doesn't look much like a rose. It has a very open look. And roses they're related to apples and plums. So single roses tend to look like an apple blossom. And semi-double looks like, more like a peach blossom, in that it has, 12 to 16 petals instead. And the thing about Flash Gordon is it has really big golden stamens in the middle of the rose with a white eye around it. So it has this sort of flash, this chrome in the garden, where it looks sort of like, look over here, look at me. It has this kind of flashiness that gardeners look for. But it also is something that pollinators look for, because with those strong, stamens in the middle, it's very bee friendly, and it's one of those roses that will bring a lot of bees into the garden.
It is a form of a pink bloom, a cerise pink. I'm not sure who cerise pink is, but what is cerise pink?
Cerise pink is a certain color. It's a very bright. It's almost hot pink.
When I said that earlier that there weren't any shrub roses on this list, this next one is. It's a shrub rose. It's a medium pink shrub rose called Penelope Lively.
Yes. Well, the Austin roses are all classified as shrub roses. And in this group of 12 new introductions that I put together, 5 of them are from the David Austin Rose Collection. And David Austin roses, they originally started over in England. Their whole thing is to come up with roses that look like they could have been growing 200 years ago. They are really into Victorian style roses. They're great big giant cabbage roses. A typical hybrid tea rose has 25 to 40 petals. Most of the Austin roses have over 100 petals.
Oof.
What happens is you've got a really big, fat cabbage style rose that's huge, just huge on the plant, huge in the vase. The problem with Austin roses that a lot of growers have is that the blooms are so heavy, their necks break. That if they get any rain on them, because they're very cuppy style roses, they collect a lot of water inside the blooms, their little neck breaks right over because it doesn't have enough substance in the stem to hold on to that big giant bloom. So the Austin folks have been working really hard on creating stronger stems so their beauties stay upright, during inclement weather. The reason, people gravitate towards Austin roses, besides the beauty of the flowers, is because they have very heavy, well-developed fragrance. They are renowned for this perfume that the Austin roses put out. And part of the reason they have such a heavy perfume is that in roses, fragrance is tied to petals. The fragrance is not inside the stamens. It's at the base of each petal is where the little fragrance gland is. Or the plant structure that would be a gland. It's where it emits its perfume, its scent. It's just at the base of the petal. So the more petals you have in a rose, the more likely that rose is to have a strong scent. And so the Austin roses, with their scores of petals, they have this very heavy fragrance in the garden, and it's a sort of fragrance that you can smell it across the garden. It's so strong, and that one bloom in a vase can scent a whole room.
It is an interesting looking flower. It's very complicated. It's like It's like looking at the June Taylor dancers from above.
And you were talking about Penelope Lively, and that is a medium pink, a middle pink shrub rose that Austin introduced. It is named for a writer who's very popular in England, and the rose was originally introduced in England in 2023. And now they have enough to share with us here in America. And so we're getting it too. And it has 120 petals per bloom. And the Austin roses that we get here in the U.S. were grown out in Texas instead of in England. When they originally started marketing Austin roses to the U.S., they were growing them out in England. And the plants were pretty small and used to really cold weather. And then they'd come over here to sunny California and more than double in size. They just got gigantic. And they found that by growing them out in Texas, they could acclimate them a lot more to conditions that they'd find here in North America, and that they stay about the same size as what they say they're going to grow instead of becoming crazy big monsters. But Penelope Lively is a classic Austin rose, and as they say, it will be an instant classic.
Now, you mentioned Texas as a growing ground. I'm very familiar with all the rose growing grounds in the southern San Joaquin Valley around Bakersfield. Are there any other rose growing areas in the United States?
Oh, well, the big ones right now is Wasco and in Texas. Wasco here in California, down near Bakersfield. There used to be a lot production down in San Diego County, but most of that is now homes or grapes.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, because the same conditions that, grapes like, roses like.
Nothing in Arizona or Nevada?
Oh, yes, there are some. There's a bunch in Arizona. And in fact, a lot of the landscape roses are coming out of Arizona.
Okay. I would think so, just because of the sun, the heat, and the low humidity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
The thing about getting a rose to market is it has to be somewhere for about 3 years before they dig them up and, sell them to the public. So that rose has been around for quite a while.
Queen of Sweden is next.
Yes.
And that too is a David Austin rose, so I would imagine it has a good scent.
Yes, it does. And it is a very, very light pink, just a blush of a pink. It's one of those creamy white with just a little cast of baby pink. It has a heavy myrrh scent and 140 petals per bloom. So it's a beautiful rose. What's interesting about it is a rose that they had originally introduced in 2004 and then decided to take it back and improve it and give it more stability, stronger stems, and more disease resistance, and then reintroduce it again. And so it's the same rose, only improved.
And it has, according to the literature with it has a heavy scent of myrrh, M-Y-R-R-H, a biblical spice if there ever was one.
What's interesting about it is myrrh is one of the scents that a rose can smell like. Roses can smell like more than 20 different things, including smelling like a rose. So myrrh is one of those different variations of what a rose can smell like. And it's a heavy, spicy scent, like perfume.
Next up is a rose, which to me is music. It's the lark ascending, which was a work by, I believe, Ralph Vaughan Williams back in the 1880s.
Yes, it is a beautiful violin piece. And this rose, it is a lovely light golden color. Again, it has that myrrh scent mixed in with more traditional tea rose scent. What's interesting about this rose is it puts out these huge flowers, but in big clusters. And the clusters, have 10, 12 blooms on one stem. And so again, it's a bouquet in a vase and very, very popular already. It's one that people are talking about.
But it's not a floribunda.
Oh no, it's classified as a shrub rose.
Okay.
The thing about the Austin roses is they are all classified as shrub roses because of the breeding history of the rose.
Hello, free subscribers to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast. We have many more tips about the new roses for 2026 and more rose growing advice as well with Master Rosarian Debbie Arrington. But first, you need to become a paid subscriber. Among the topics Debbie and I talk about after the paywall in the podcast and newsletter include 6 more new rose entries for 2026, One is an American Garden Rose Award winner and another rose that won a major award at the Portland, Oregon Rose Show for its scent. We also have advice for choosing roses this time of year at a nursery. And after the paywall, tips for preserving the aroma of a rose when you bring it indoors as a cut flower. Again, that extended podcast, as well as a complete transcript in the newsletter, is only available to paid subscribers. And frankly, a subscription to the Beyond the Garden Basics is rather reasonably priced, $5 a month or $50 a year. And besides the complete newsletter, transcript, and podcast, paid subscribers also get access to the entire library of past newsletter editions, which now number close to 300. Paid subscribers also get to leave comments, and they'll get their garden questions answered promptly. Plus, your paid subscription lets me know that I'm doing something worthwhile here, that you find of value, even if perhaps it's only occasionally. The Beyond the Garden Basics podcast and newsletter comes out once a week on Fridays. So thanks again for becoming a paid subscriber. Just click on the subscribe link in the newsletter to keep the good research-based gardening information coming your way. And don't forget that when you do, you'll get the entire podcast and the complete newsletter, including the transcription. Thank you for listening and reading the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast.